Welcome to HR.com Live. This podcast is produced by HR.com, the #1 destination to help 1.7 million HR executives maximize human potential and drive extraordinary business results.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to HR.com Live. My name is Dr. Patti Fletcher, and I'm the Chief Equity Advocate and HR Disruptor here at HR.com. And I am on a mission to disrupt the business of people at every level and every function of the workplace. And lucky you, I get to be your host for today. In this episode, we're going to talk to my dear friend, Nicole McCabe, about how we have been getting diversity and inclusion wrong. I can't wait for this conversation. Nicole brings over 20 years of technology industry experience in a variety of leadership roles that include marketing, account management, human resources, and partner ecosystems. This person is an ace when it comes to supply chain as well. This diverse experience has enabled Nicole to drive innovation through transformational programs that include EDGE certification, the only gender equality certification, becoming the fastest and largest certified company and the first technology company to achieve this status. It's a very big deal. Nicole, I'm so excited to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, let's get the fun started. So let's talk about what exactly is going on. What's the struggle with inclusion?
Sure. So I am a big believer that everyone has been struggling with diversity and inclusion. We hear about diversity and inclusion all the time, right? It's everywhere. It's in the news. It's in our companies that we go to. It's everywhere, whether we know it or not. But at the core, I think a lot of companies are struggling to actually succeed with the inclusion component of this equation. And I believe that a lot of that has to do with the way in which we've built our strategies, right? Failure to truly achieve inclusion is built purely on our inability from a strategic approach to D&I to bake in everyone. Mm-hmm. So we talk about programs, we angle everything towards the underrepresented groups, which is so critical because those are the numbers and the individuals that need to feel included. And those are the numbers that we need to get up as well, because we know if they don't feel included, they're going to walk out the door anyway. But when we're not messaging towards the majority, when we're not embracing those sort of privileged groups, as you and I talk about, numbers will go up. But guess what else goes up? Resentment. Yeah. Resentment for those groups that have not been baked in to your strategy, and most importantly, the execution component to it. So you're executing a strategy purely for numbers, and that doesn't always equate to the inclusion being successful.
You just hit the nail on the head, right? So when people talk about diversity, and sometimes they say diversity and inclusion, but they're using those words interchangeably. And really what you just talked about is bean counting. When we focus too much on the number of in the representation, that's just counting heads. That has nothing to do with culture, which is ultimately what you're talking about. So what are some of those key measurements when it comes to trying to truly create a culture of and where even represented populations are part of the program? You're really making me think, Nicole, and for those listening in, we need to start thinking about diversity and inclusion, not in addition to, but how we work with our workforce. So can you talk a little bit about some of the key measurement changes we should be looking at?
Sure. So I think absolutely one of the biggest key measurements is around employee engagement, right? At the core of it, when you look at just the term inclusion, it means to be able to bring your true self somewhere, right? And so that's exactly what an employee engagement score will measure. What I found shocking was that, in 2018, I think it was a Gallup poll on employee engagement, right? And what they found is, especially in the US and Canada, that employee engagement number across the board, it's just hovered in the low 30s, which is shocking, right? Because diversity and inclusion has been around for a long time, but certainly I would argue over the past 7 years, it's seen a huge uptake, especially in technology firms, right? They're investing millions of dollars, and to still have it stay stagnant in the low 30s is quite incredible. Now, they were seeing it start to edge upward. So in 2018, they found in the US and in Canada, so I have to look at the other countries around the globe, but it was hovering around 34%. So yes, it's moving up, but think about what that says, right? That says that 66% of employees are either completely miserable in their roles or they're completely disengaged. And why should we care about that? Not only does it help retain employees, but it's a huge financial cost to companies. And so when we talk about measurements, look at employee engagement, but I would take it one step further beyond employee engagement. And what I mean by that is look at the finances behind it. At SAP, when I was in my role as the global head of gender equality, one of the things that we did was we partnered with an external consulting company, and they actually came in and looked at specifically SAP's cost when it came to an employee engagement score. And the results were quite shocking, because what they found was that for every 1% that we were able to increase employee engagement as an organization, that was approximately 45 million euros directly to the bottom line, right? And we hear all the time talk about the business case, make the business case unique to your organization, right? And a lot of people won't argue that. But let me tell you, when you're walking into a room and saying, hey, we were able to increase employee engagement score by 2%, which is 90 million euros to the bottom line, people start to listen.
That's incredible. And the challenge that, having been in the HR world for well over 2 decades and been in diversity and inclusion for about 15 years, it's really difficult to even get a correlation. Right. We've seen all the, the companies with more women in their boards or C-suite or companies that have at least representation in those decision-making and influencer positions that represent who they're actually trying to serve that market, that they tend to perform better. But that's a coincidence in most studies. And so I love what you're saying, that there is now a way to actually get, not causation, nobody's there yet, but correlation. That is a leader, right? I want inclusivity, but I also like money. Right. So, right. And we have shareholders we're accountable to. I mean, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. It's huge. And so with the Gallup numbers, folks, those numbers haven't changed in well over a decade. There is a global problem. It's in the 80% for disengagement. And so what Nicole's saying here is really interesting, because we tend to look at things like performance management and all these other wonderful programs we have, but we're not doing it with a D&I, true and, to Nicole's point, where all populations are represented, not just the underrepresented. We're not looking at it like that. And Nicole, I'm listening to you and going, oh my God, we should.
Right.
So that brings me to the next point. How exactly do we drive inclusion? We can hire people that look totally different than the people we see in the mirror, but to your point, that's not enough. That's not going to change the ROI.
Right. No, it's not going to change the ROI, right? And we've heard about unconscious bias, and I'm a believer in unconscious bias as a component to a strategy, right? Some people will say, I don't know if training works. Look, if it's component to your strategy, I think it's absolutely critical, because we all have bias, and that's okay. I mean, I have my own bias, but the fact that I'm aware of those enables me to catch myself, right? And so I do believe understanding the bias that is within yourself and within your organization is critical. And I would also encourage folks that when you're looking to drive the inclusion component, that's really, in my mind, the inclusion is a measurement of how well that strategy was orchestrated and designed and executed, right? Because if you have a diversity strategy and you're not seeing those employee engagement, which is the measurement of inclusion, go up, it's not done correctly. And so I would really urge companies to look at their own strategies with an unbiased lens. Get as many eyes on it, right? I've seen program after program be built and rolled out, completely ignoring messaging for all. Right? And so it comes off as this group is better than the others. We need this group more than we need you, right? And so I encourage people to go and look at their strategies, look at their programs with an unbiased lens. I also encourage them to look at their existing programs. I think by nature, we think that we need to create a new program. I would argue that perhaps programs already exist and we can make those programs more inclusive. We can put criteria around the programs. We can look at how we're selecting into programs, especially top talent programs, right? Mm-hmm. That was a big thing that we found at SAP is when we looked at the top talent program, even though that was supposed to be our future leaders and we were striving to get more women into leadership positions, the top talent program was only comprised of, I think, 10% women, right? So you need to look at how are we selecting people for those programs? What's that criteria look like? So if you're able to take existing ones and just shift it or put that lens on it that says, wait a minute, this may have been built with a biased, viewpoint when it was created. I think that goes a long way. And I would just say, embed that thinking, embed the unbiased lens into everything companies do. And look at the processes. Think about, is this truly for everyone or is it designed for one or few? Look at the programs and overall look at the culture that you're building as well.
Nicole, we could do a whole podcast and maybe 10 podcasts. And I do publicly want to invite you back because what you just said is so critical. I've talked with you. I've talked with so many other D&I leaders. And what they say is that like the first month or so that they hold the job, everybody's coming out of the woodwork with a great program idea, right? Instead of unpacking what's already there and saying, okay, so we still need top talent, right? We still need to have succession plans. We still need to do these things because, people. And we have to make sure that we're future-proofed. Why don't we take a look at what we have? And is it working? And do we have the representation we want, right, to your point, an indicator of inclusion? Or do we need to change some things? And it really just keeps driving home the same thing you and I talk about a lot on this podcast and off. It's not what you think, it's how you're thinking.
Right.
As HR leaders, your job is to enable a different how. And so, and that brings me to the next thing around, people being able to feel part of it. A former colleague you and I used to work with used to kid around with me and say that I was in the business of diversion and exclusion because she knew it annoyed me. Right. So you talked a bit about we tend to create, programs for women, programs for LGBTQ, and we understand why, and they're all well-meaning, but they haven't moved the freaking needle. And a lot of times, right, at the same time, we get people saying, why are you doing this? And by the way, why aren't I included? What about me? And that I always have reactions to that. So let's talk about the exclusions. Let's talk about the guy, right, who's not necessarily part of these newer programs, even though you just said they better be. Can you talk a little about the exclusions?
Sure. So, you and I have talked so many times about privileged, right? And I'm a big advocate for really including, right, those that are in what we would say categorically are privileged categories. I don't like the term because immediately lends itself into giving people permission to push back on those groups, right? To create ultimately resentment groups. And those are the groups that you absolutely need to drive your strategy forward. So privilege definitely exists. I mean, we have all this research out there too, but I think that we do need to remember that this system that we live in that has allowed these privileged groups was not created overnight, right? And quite frankly, it wasn't created by these individuals. It was created by people before them. And I see a lot of, I can't tell you how many blogs I've read on privilege. And what they come across to me as is, let's penalize these people for something that they didn't create. When if we put our arms around them and actually embrace these groups, let's make them part of the transformation towards creating a future that works for everyone, which is ultimately what inclusion is, right? And so if you leave them out, it's never going to work because someone's always going to be resented, which is exactly where we are today.
It really is. And it's so what I really like about what you're saying is we can continue pointing fingers, right? But that doesn't solve anything. What we have to do is disrupt the system, which is one of my favorite topics, because the system it's not efficient, it's not effective, and it's inequitable. Okay, great. And so the thing is, like, the white guys they're working within the system that we are all working in. And you're right? Most work systems are over 100 years old in terms of their structure, their constructs, and all of that. And because it's just the way it is, what would be the catalyst for them to be like, wait a minute? But what I do find is that we do have to start creating something that's more focused on the system versus just focused on the people and focused on a collective outcome. This has been amazing. So, we can't end with just you and I chit-chatting about what we believe. We actually have to give some calls to action, and there's no one better than you. Do you have a call to action for the folks listening and watching, like maybe a starting point, anything?
Yes. So first and foremost, if you do one thing, look at your strategy that exists today when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Look at what that looks like. Look at, was it created with a biased lens? Do you have a strategy that is being executed in an inclusive way? And that could be the messaging, right? Or are you going out there and saying, here's a program for women, or here's a program for millennials, or, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. So first and foremost, absolutely look at your strategy. And the second call to action, I would say, is know your organization. Be very real with yourself around where are you at in the maturity level of a diversity and inclusion organization, right? Some companies are just starting out. Others have been doing it for a decade or more, right? And so what comes out in research, what might seem like it's making a huge impact at another organization might not work for your organization. So I think it's so critical for companies to really take a good look at who they are, where they're at in their journey. And again, going back to linking it to the strategy. Do they even have the right strategy that was created in an unbiased way that supports their culture?
That is brilliant. And, you just said something also really important. What works in one company might work in another. And gosh, I remember, in the old days when you and I were working on this topic at SAP, it became very clear very quickly that even within your own company, what's a challenge in one place won't be a challenge in another. Geography, function, whatever those things are, right? I mean, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Nicole, thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience and insights with us. It's been awesome. And thank you everyone for watching. Don't forget to check out our archived episodes on HR.com. We release new episodes every single day on all things HR. Thank you so much, everybody. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to HR.com Live. We have new episodes daily to help you maximize your potential. Be sure to check out our archives on HR.com and share it with your friends. Cheers.